There's a moment most people don't see. It's not the day he walks out. It's not the argument that ends everything. It's not the slammed door or the packed suitcase. It's quieter than that. It's the moment he realizes that explaining himself no longer changes anything. At first, he tried. He tried to articulate what he meant. He tried to clarify when he was misunderstood. He tried to soften his tone. He tried to be less reactive. He tried to find better timing. He didn't wake up one morning and decide to shut down. He slowly arrived there. Because over time, something happens to a person who feels repeatedly unheard. Psychologically, when effort doesn't produce change, the brain adapts. It conserves energy. It reduces vulnerability. It pulls back from what feels ineffective. This isn't dramatic. It's biological. If touching the stove burns you enough times, eventually you stop reaching. For many men, emotional exposure can start to feel like that stove. Not because the other person is cruel. Not necessarily because the relationship is toxic, but because vulnerability feels unsupported. So he recalibrates. He still shows up. He still provides. He still fulfills responsibilities. He still engages in practical conversation. But emotionally, he steps back. And that step back is rarely announced. There's no meeting where he says, "I've decided to withdraw." There's just less sharing, less initiating, less explaining, less fighting. And that last part confuses people. Because when he stops arguing, it can look like growth. It can look like maturity. It can look like calm. But there is a difference between peace and disengagement. Peace feels connected. Disengagement feels distant. Externally, they can look identical. Internally, they are worlds apart. When a man goes quiet, it's often not because he has nothing to say. It's because he no longer believes saying it will matter. And that belief shift is powerful. Many men are conditioned early to tolerate discomfort quietly, to handle it, to be steady, to not overreact, to not be dramatic. So when they feel dismissed, misunderstood, or emotionally minimized, they don't always escalate. They internalize. They rationalize. They tell themselves it's not a big deal. She didn't mean it. I'm overthinking. I should just let it go. And sometimes that's healthy. But when that pattern repeats over months or years, something erodes. Resentment doesn't always explode. Sometimes it calcifies. It hardens quietly. And eventually, he stops attempting depth. Because depth feels one-sided. There's also pride involved. Not ego, but dignity. Every human being has a threshold for how many times they'll attempt connection without feeling reciprocated. When that threshold is crossed, the nervous system shifts from engagement to protection. This is important. Protection can look calm. Protection can look rational. Protection can look composed. But protection is still distance. And distance, over time, reshapes identity. He starts to tell himself, this is just how relationships are. Men don't get that kind of support. It's easier to keep things surface level. He lowers his expectations. And when expectations lower, effort lowers with them. He doesn't stop loving. He stops hoping. That distinction matters. Because hope requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires perceived safety. If safety feels uncertain, hope feels risky. So he manages himself. He manages his tone. He manages his reactions. He manages his needs. Until eventually, he manages them out of sight. This is the silent exit. Not from the house. Not from the marriage certificate. But from the emotional center of the relationship. And the tragedy is that it's often invisible at first. There's no dramatic betrayal. No catastrophic event. Just a slow emotional retreat. She might notice he's quieter. He might notice she's frustrated. But neither may fully recognize what's happening underneath. Because the withdrawal feels reasonable. It feels like maturity. It feels like avoiding conflict. But conflict avoidance and emotional absence are not the same thing. One seeks harmony. The other avoids risk. And over time, avoidance creates a gap. A subtle loneliness. He may begin to feel alone even while sitting next to someone. Not because he hates her. Not because he wants someone else. But because he no longer feels met. And when someone doesn't feel met, they begin meeting themselves internally instead. They build an internal world. Private thoughts. Private disappointments. Private acceptance. And once that internal world becomes more comfortable than shared vulnerability, re-entry becomes harder. This is why some relationships appear stable for years and then collapse suddenly. The collapse isn't sudden. The exit started long ago. It just wasn't loud. There's also something else that happens during this process. Identity shifts. When a man feels that expressing emotion leads nowhere, he may begin to detach from emotion itself. Not consciously, but functionally. He focuses more on tasks, more on work, more on routines, more on distractions, because those areas feel controllable. Emotion starts to feel inefficient. And when something feels inefficient long enough, we minimize it. But minimizing emotion doesn't remove it. It buries it. And buried emotion doesn't disappear. It turns into irritability, or numbness, or quiet dissatisfaction, or an increasing sense of, I don't know what's wrong, I just feel off. By the time someone says, you don't talk to me anymore, he may genuinely not know how to reopen that door. Because the door didn't slam shut. It slowly rusted closed. Now, here's the part that matters. Silence feels powerful in the short term. It feels controlled. It feels safe. It avoids escalation. But long term, silence erodes intimacy. Connection requires exposure. Exposure requires risk. And risk requires courage. Not loud courage. Not aggressive courage. But steady, uncomfortable honesty. The kind that says, I feel like I've stopped trying. Or, I don't think I've felt heard in a long time. That conversation is harder than walking away. Because walking away protects pride. Staying engaged risks rejection. So when a man goes quiet, it's rarely laziness. It's rarely apathy. It's often self-protection layered over disappointment. And the most dangerous part, he can live there for years. Functioning, providing, participating, while emotionally half present. He didn't leave. He just withdrew access. And most people don't recognize it until something breaks. If you recognize this in yourself, pause. Not to assign blame, not to replay every argument, just to notice the shift. Ask yourself, when did I stop believing my voice mattered? When did I start choosing silence over effort? When did protecting myself become more important than being known? Awareness interrupts patterns. Silence protects you, but it also isolates you. And isolation, over time, reshapes who you are. The silent exit doesn't begin at the end. It begins the moment hope quietly declines. He didn't leave. He just went quiet. And if nothing changes, one day, the quiet becomes permanent. If this resonated with you, not loudly, but quietly, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more conversations like this, about the internal lives men rarely talk about, you can like and subscribe. Not for noise, for understanding.